It isn't listening and following. There could just be one key information that you could grab, and that may be what it's all for the 4-day commitment that ETF demands of every one of us. Same level of commitment as we anticipate today is also expected for the remaining days, tomorrow and next. Every day offers us a whole lineup of unique activities and fresh opportunities. Let me state, as a science diplomat who's had the opportunity of being the only one selected in the inaugural cohort of GESDA, the Geneva Science Diplomacy Anticipator, the biggest multilateral platform on science diplomacy, where 30 people were selected globally to engage at the United Nations, and I was the one representing the entire West Africa. So let me confirm, as a science diplomat, that Enugu is fully positioned on all fronts to provide tech leadership for the African continent under the distinguished leadership of Dr. Peter Mba. The primary purpose of governance and government is security and welfare, so says the Constitution. And of course, welfare also have other arms, which includes education, health, job creation. Friends, you can all agree with me that this current administration has been able to leverage on technology to enhance outcomes both in security and in welfare. In security, through AI embedded systems that allow faster response and better oversight. In education, through the smart schools, where students are exposed to robotics, mechatronics, artificial intelligence, and applied engineering. And I'm happy to announce to you that by Friday, we'll have some young tech builders from the Enugu Smart Green Schools who will be coming here to present, some of the tech projects they have developed, which also includes a moving robot. And I'm sure you'll be happy to see that on Friday. So don't miss out. All of these are happening at the instance of uncommon infrastructural transformation in Enugu State, alongside the advent of Enugu Air, which have made air travel in and out of Enugu more accessible and affordable. You're someone who travel a lot through the air. Before now, sometimes, like when you begin to get close to where you want to travel, sometimes even accessing a flight, not to talk about, the high payment you have to make, but with several, fleets in and out of Enugu made available through the Enugu Air, we can all boast of making air travel, which interestingly is also the safest way to travel, more accessible and affordable. With the milestones so far and the sustainable template of the current administration, we can affirm that Enugu is positioned to take the lead in Africa's tech evolution. And we all can be super excited that we are part of history making.
Shape the future, but who will shape technology? That's a question you and I ought to answer. And while you're doing that, Enugu is providing an opportunity to help you shape the future of technology. Please, let's celebrate the Enugu State government once again for Enugu Tech Fest 2026. You can do better than that. We're talking about the Enugu State government. Thank you so much. Next up, we'll be having the fireside chat. And the topic is on driving financial inclusion and digital payments innovation in Nigeria's heartland, or the future of secure, seamless transactions in a cashless economy. This would be handled by our lead compere, no other person than Dr. Adora Onyechere Sydney Jack, an international broadcaster and entrepreneur. Please put your hands together as I welcome her on stage. Please keep clapping till she gets here. She is our lead compere. She will introduce the person who will be answering questions on this particular subject matter. Like I said, keep clapping till she gets here. You look lovely, by the way. Very lovely.
Good morning, everyone. No, the energy is quite low. Good morning, everyone. I think this side of the hall, there's some sort of energy drink that they had because there's a lot of energy. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. It's coming. Good morning, everyone. Okay, so let's keep quiet on this side. Let's just do this side first. Good morning, everyone. Okay. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. So all of us, good morning, everyone. Fantastic. Please put your hands together for yourself. It's been an amazing, profound, 2 days. This is day 2. And yesterday when we started, there was a lot of unveiling, a lot of sharing. There's a lot of unlearning as well. I mean, from some of the speakers, one of the highlights somebody took away was that riches are loud, but wealth whispers. And so that means when you think of wealth, you're thinking of systems, you're thinking of structure, you're thinking of sustainability, you're thinking of growth. And I think that stood out for a lot of us here. This fireside chat really is going to be looking at financial inclusion. So I'll start with a quote. Financial inclusion is not charity, it is the architecture of opportunity. Now, in an era where Nigeria's cashless ambition is accelerating, the true measure of progress is not how advanced our systems are, but how accessible those opportunities become. And we're talking about Tech Fest here in Enugu, and digital transformation only matters when it reaches the last mile. So the last mile is about community, it's about the suburban areas, it's about the villages. And innovation in Nigeria's heartland, and we know that Enugu is the heartland of Nigeria, looks at the question on how we can build a payment ecosystem that is not only seamless and secure, but radically inclusive, one that works just as effectively in Nigeria's communities and commercial hubs, as well as in communities in Enugu State here, where we are today. So it is my pleasure to moderate this conversation. And to do this with me would be Abimbola Rees. Abimbola, please make your way to the stage if you're in the room. Please, if I can have her come. I think she's probably still in the speaker's lounge if she's not here. So just a bit about Abimbola before she comes in. She's an enthusiast of payments, a business development, product innovation in the information and technology sector. And she has over 2 decades in financial technology and payment services. And she also comes with a wealth of experience in strategic business planning in financial technology business. Now, she's also a respected fintech and payments leader whose work sits at the intersection of technology, trust, and scale. And so that means that her experience is very versatile, and she offers critical insight into how digital payment platforms can bridge structural gaps, reduce cash dependency, and also unlock economic participation for underserved populations, especially vulnerable groups and people at the community level. So we're going to be having an in-depth conversation this morning to really look at what does inclusive financial opportunities mean, especially to communities. Also looking at driving financial inclusion and digital payments innovation for us first here in Enugu State. Now, when you hear financial inclusion, what comes to your mind? Let me start with some feedback. When you think of financial inclusion, what comes to your mind? Does anybody have an answer here? Can somebody go for it? Okay, I saw your hand up. When you think financial inclusion, what comes to your mind? Please, ma'am, can you sit here? Yes, thank you very much. So please put your hands together. She crept onto the stage without me knowing. She deserves an applause. So she just saved you from answering that question. So I'll take it back to her here on the stage. So thank you so much. It's good to have you this morning. And thank you for standing in a short notice, but with the kind of expertise, we've just read out your profile. I mean, we are very privileged to have you on this conversation. And I like that it's us girls, doing this morning. Yesterday, we saw a lot of the guys. So thinking and talking inclusion, I like that as a woman that is talking fintech with me this morning. So thank you, Abimbola, for coming on the panel. So I'll first of all maybe start with what the basics are. So from cash to cold. Let's look at what do you see as the most significant barrier preventing everyday Nigerians, for instance. Now we're in Enugu. What do you think especially is the barrier for informal traders, small, medium enterprise, and of course, from fully adopting digital payments? What do you think those barriers have been, and if there are any at all?
Good morning, everyone, and thanks for having me. There are a couple of things, and they are being considered in our space for payment solutions for servicing the grassroots. The first thing is education. You would agree with me that you are afraid of what you don't know. A lot of people, if you do not understand something, the next best thing is to be afraid of it. And when you're afraid of something, you don't interact with it. So education is a major barrier. If they don't understand it, if you cannot relate to it, then it becomes a barrier for you to use it. Another barrier is simplicity of use. So you have very high-tech solutions being handed out to modern users, urban users, and then it's being handed out also to grassroots users, small businesses. You would find that it becomes difficult to interact with it because it's not as simplified as you would have it for those type of audiences or users. Another thing is breaking it down. That's just a subset of simplicity, is to the language barrier, the parlance barrier that you see today. So there are a lot of businesses that are not as friendly to the kind of languages that you see today used on some of these platforms. And it is important that you make it very relatable, very easy to understand, so that you see applications coming in native languages, help FAQs being answered in native languages to make it easy for users to interact with. Then another thing is trust. So you have, when you're afraid of something, you don't trust it because you don't even interact with it. So the absence of trust is another barrier. And I've had an interaction in the marketplace sometime in the past, where I wanted to purchase something from someone, and she needed one of our wards to go and bring the item, and the ward was not available at that time. And then she found that she wanted to call the person on the phone, that the person was at where she was going to bring the item, and then it was going to be faster to reach her over the phone to actually ask her to add that item to what she was bringing. But then she didn't have airtime on her phone. So she had to send someone else to go and get airtime for her to be able to load on her phone. And then I was then telling her that, but you can purchase airtime from your phone. And then she laughed and told me, no, madam. The airtime that you people buy from the phone gets exhausted faster than the one that I scratched from the card. And I was surprised because there was no way that should be the case. So the trust level is not so good. So she didn't bother to interface or use that application. A lot has changed over the years now. We have seen some embrace of the usage of technology, but we need to do more. Those are the concerns, and those are the things that we have found from operating within this space, and that we are working to correct.
So I hear you say some of the barriers are education, simplicity of use, domestication of language, and trust. And, when you spoke about trust, it sort of just jolted me straight into my next question, because it's crafted around trust, security, and adoption. In a climate where you see growing cyber risk, I mean, you just gave a story about the call card experience. In a climate where you're seeing growing cyber risk and consumer skepticism, because that's also what this lady experienced, how can, payment providers build systems that are not only secure but trusted, not only at the urban level, but at the community suburban level?
It is important to be users, and then you're basing your security, your interface with what you expect from those type of customers. What we do at eTransact in building our product is we do a lot of research, and the research is focused on the user type that the solution is made for, so that an understanding of the challenges that they face or that they will face are being incorporated into what is being built for them. Another thing is machine learning, AI tools being used to understand patterns and behaviors that has been experienced in the past or are being experienced and is being learned as the users are interfacing with the platform. That helps to bring about fraud prevention. So it is not reactive, it's predictive, because we've seen it, maybe a pattern has established itself over a period and it leads to certain type of activities within the system, and then it's prevented from at the infrastructure level. So there is the understanding of what the customer needs, there is the understanding of what the system has gathered from the usage of the platform, and then I will come back to user education. At the end of the day, these risks that we see are not, they're usually socially engineered. So customers, users would let go of information that are supposed to be secured with them. And that is the first point of entry into their financial space. So that is also important to the extent that every person that is using any technology or any payment rail understands that the security starts with them first.
Okay, so just a follow-up question for what you said, talking about, research and user mapping. Now, when you're thinking about usage, you're thinking about different ecosystems. And so you're talking about students, you're talking about market women, you're talking about artisans, and then you're also talking about the educated. How do you often look at the research tools according to the ecosystems?
Can you say that again? I didn't get that.
When you're thinking about user mapping, you talked about research. How do you map? Because for different areas and different ecosystems, there's a level of knowledge. So for instance, we have students right here in this room, and some of them are already engaging in digital tools and already trading. You also have market women who may not have the level of education they have. You also have artisans who have no schooling at all. So how do you map what they need when you research?
So there is segmentation, just like you have done it. And that understanding builds the product design, the tools that are being sent into the marketplace, the product that these segments would use. There is also learning. I talked about machine learning. So every activity that is happening within the ecosystem is being understood by a system that says, okay, these are the sect of users that are interfacing with this product. It may be a completely new, an old product that they've interfaced with, and that learning is imported into new product that will be pushed into the market for different segments of users. It goes into as far as demography. So we have a product called Pocket Money today. Is it a digital app? It's a wallet app that is very young people forward. So you would see parlance, you see lingos that are understood by the younger demography. So sometimes I use the application, I see certain things, I'm like, okay, what does this mean? But because the focus is for a particular segment of users, then the language that is being used is different. Now, it also takes into consideration if I had added my age to the application on my onboarding process, I am sure that I probably will be seeing a different type of language. Mine will have commas and question marks. You know, those don't happen anymore as used to. Yeah, so those are the things that we consider in product development and releases that we give to users.
Okay, so I know that you have quite a decade of experience in financial technology and payment systems. And so it's very critical for us to bring this down, because here we are This is the Tech Fest, the second year. And we have a lot of students who have also started to do digital financing, especially online with their trade. Now, let's look at inclusion beyond access. And what I mean by that is when a lot of people, I just asked before you came, what do they know about financial inclusion? When you hear inclusion, a lot of people just think, oh, it's about majority and minority groups, vulnerable groups. No one really thinks about, accessibility or community, engagement. So perhaps you may want to just give us a basic understanding first of what financial inclusion means from your financial technology experience and how this also, pertains to the students here in the room.
So I would like to categorize into three. We have the banked. That's the language we use. It doesn't mean that you have a bank account, but the banked, those are the users that are familiar with applications, payment rails, and the likes. They're already using it. They are familiar with it. Then we have the underbanked that are using it in piecemeals. They interface with these solutions or these payment rails in a different way. I would give an example. A market woman would be called an underbanked in this case, where she can access a POS agent. She's still driving a transaction through a payment ecosystem, but she's not directly involved. A third party is helping her to do that. A banked user, a banked customer, a banked person would have direct access to the usage of the payment rails. But in the case of a market woman that doesn't and is using an agent to complete a transaction, she's underbanked. Then we have the huge number of unbanked. They don't want to interface with payment rails. They don't want to interface with POS agents. They just want to run their activities and business on cash. So those are the three categories. Then there is the category that is not fully, that's the banks that are not fully experiencing the full scope of financial technology, financial services. So today they have a mobile application that can do funds transfer, do airtime, but they cannot do investments. They cannot do a lot of other services. So inclusion would be bringing those users that are even banked to do more, to bring the underbanked ecosystem. So that is the base understanding of financial inclusion, and creating tools and channels that makes it easy for them to migrate from one segment to the other. And that talks about simplicity and all that things that we talked about earlier.
Okay, so what would be the challenge for those who are not, for instance, banked? I ask this because when I'm thinking financial inclusion, I'm also thinking financial exclusion. So what happens to those excluded? What do they tend to miss?
I would say simplicity of life, speed and ability to use time for other things. Now, so if you have to go to the bank to get cash, and time is very valuable. You would expend time. There is also risk. Whether we like it or not, when you move around with your cash, you're exposed to the risk of whatever may happen in the course of transit. Then also, the the opportunity to grow is also very highly diminished, in the sense that you don't have footprints of your activities where you can present to a financial institution to say, this is the quantum of business I've done over 6 months, and I would like to get a loan from you so that I can expand my business. So that also becomes a challenge for that business or for that person, even though the person may not readily know that those are the challenges that they are experiencing or that they would face, because they are not embedded or they are not included in the ecosystem. There's so many other things that they miss out because they are not in that space. But those are the very major ones that I can readily point to. for not being part of the ecosystem.
Okay. I mean, when we think about the Enugu Tech Fest, from when the conversation and planning till now that we've activated, this is day 2. We've seen that we have over 28,000 participants, that are engaging on this across Nigeria, even though it's happening in Enugu. Enugu's from diaspora, Enugu people from different parts of Nigeria and the world. And some of the conversations online that you also see, the question is, how do we invest in the population that is growing to be the new population of the new technology, builders? They ask the question, technology is building, but who's building technology? How do we manage? So when we're thinking investments, because it's something else that you're really passionate about, investments and partnership, where do you think that Enugu can look towards, especially with the young population they have and the ability to grow the digital literacy within the state? So where do you think?
There's a lot, actually. I think this event in itself is very impressive. The numbers is outstanding, and I believe that the turnout would continuously improve and get better. I think the platform will also serve as a point where education is being transmitted much more easily. We have the audience here listening in and even online. That is also investment. When you have people as part of your process, you have built a community that is invested in what you're building. That is the first leg of investment. Now, talking about partnerships, we have, as eTransact, we are vested in technology first. So we are a payments solution provider licensed by CBN, but we also pride ourselves as a technology company because technology is what we're using to build the rails that we are building for payment. And we believe that, we believe in innovation, we believe in co-creation, and that is why we are here. So we are looking towards hearing more from Enugu. What are you planning to do? How can we play in that space? How can we bring our wealth of experience to say, this is what we have noticed over 25 years, over 20 years of operations in Nigeria and some other part of Nigeria, part of Africa. And these are the things that we should be looking towards building for Enugu to expand the scope of the investments that we have. And from the diaspora as well, we could talk about enabling payments for people in diaspora to also engage the solutions and the services that is being churned out of this laudable initiative, wherein where they can also easily exchange for money, pay, and do all of those obligations without having to worry about how transmission will be done. So enabling them will also be part of the investment that we're looking at. But most importantly is co-creation and execution. So that is what we are looking at. And then financing. Financing is part of it. At the end of the day, to execute, you need finance. But then if you have usage, it builds the baseline for the financing to be easy. And when you know that when you produce it, when you build it, they will come. So, yeah, that's the way we're looking at it.
Okay, so my closing question would be a call to action. What would be your call to action for advancing financial inclusion in Enugu State? Because I hear you say a lot about it. And one thing that keeps coming to me is the area of user education. How can they expand that? Considering there's a lot of interest, but little literacy, what can be done in that regard?
I think literacy is a matter of you and I and everybody that is represented here. So you interface regularly. That's at the lowest level, I would say. You interface, your circle of influence is the point of literacy. That's where the literacy should start. And that is what one of the things I do personally to say, when I interface with a user that I know probably does not understand what it means, I take it upon myself to say, this is this, and this is what you can learn. Do you have a son that can run you through this? Madam, let me send something to you. Let him look at it and let him talk more about it. So we have that, and it's a commitment that I have taken on, and I think everyone here should take on board, because when you are not financially included, when you are not in the ecosystem, I mentioned the opportunities that are lost. So everyone here, especially students, parents and communities, listen more. to students because they feel they just know these things more than we do. That's the thinking. And so we take it upon ourselves. Then I am very, very happy with what Enugu is doing. It's a platform that will change the narrative over time. When I was coming in, I was wowed by how everything was put together, and it is a platform that will teach and that would help with literacy. And I think state government should also embrace this. At the federal level, with the central bank, there is a lot of initiative, a lot of push for financial inclusion. But for it to trickle down further, the states will have to embrace it, just like Enugu has done. Then it should trickle down even further to the local government levels and to individuals as we have here. And then it becomes easier. And then the mode of communication should be simplified more and more so that it becomes, relatable and embraceable by this sector of users that we hope to bring on board.
Thank you so much. Please, she deserves an applause. She deserves an applause. And one thing I hear you say, your circle of influence is where your literacy begins, and so start from there. So I don't know if anybody has any question. I just have one, because I see the compare slowly walking towards me, and that's my time is up. But if I can have one question or feedback from any member of the audience.
Any questions? Well then, if there are no questions, can we have a
it means
bigger
that we
round
are
of applause?
absolutely engaging the conversation. So maybe food for thought for you to perhaps step down this conversation. One of the things I also hear is user education. So ask questions. You can meet her on the sideline and ask her questions and engage. I'm sure she'll be willing to interact with you. Thank you so much, Mr. Bimbele.
Thank you.
It's
Thank
great
you,
to
everyone,
have you
for
on this
listening.
panel. And
Thank
that
you.
will be it for us. And thank you for being a quiet yet engaging audience without your voice echoed. My name is Adora. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Adora, and thank you to the guests too. We'll move straight to the next fireside chat. For this one, we are taking a look at building scalable digital products from Africa. So I would like to call up to moderate this particular fireside chat, Ifedeli Onyebu. Can we have Ifedeli Onyebu on stage, please? Is Ifedeli here? Great. Put your hands together for him, please. All right, so joining him for the fireside chat is a tech founder of the ecosystem build, Ugochukwu Arono. I'm sure you know him very well. He was here last year, by the way. Give him a round of applause. Keep clapping, please.
All right. Good everyone. How you guys doing? Hello. Okay, nice. So we're just going to get straight into it. I'm going to introduce myself first, and then he goes next, and start the whole stuff. My name is Ifedili Onyebu, and I'm a CTO at Soundrig, and I'm a software developer at the best. And here we have.
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, I'm Ugochukwu Arono, and I'm an engineer. I think I'll just start with that. Thank you.
All right, thanks for that. So today we are going to be talking about building scalable digital products from Africa. And so we are going to be talking around innovation, infrastructure, and ecosystem. And I think we have the best person to talk about this as far as the Southeast is involved. And just before we start, Ugo, I'm a very big fan of your work. I feel like the work you've done here was one of the reasons why a lot of people like me got into Web3 in the first place, because I got to meet people that worked at your company, and I got to, I got exposed to stuff that people are doing at scale. So I just wanted to mention that. So now, what does it take to build digital products in Africa that scales globally? What does it take?
Okay, so first, when it comes to building digital products, there's something I like to say to anybody at all. And these are things I learned over the years. When you want to create anything, whether it's a digital product or, whatever it is, you need to try as much as possible to understand that problem from ground up. That's from the first principles. You may not be able to understand everything from day one, but you need to make conscious effort to understand it from first principles, from ground up. And I've faced challenges over the years, trying to just build things at a superficial level or at a high level. And eventually you realize that you don't have control. And when you don't have control, that product is as good as dead, because any other person or a bigger company or something can just take over that business, and all your work is gone. So I like to start from that approach when building any product. So in this case, digital products. Why? Because I think someone yesterday spoke about infrastructure, spoke about algorithms. That was Gossi, from Kingmakers. And one thing we need to understand when you want to build products at scale, because he asks digital products at scale, the truth is you need to be able to understand what that product does, and you need to be able to know how to control the product from, bare metal. If I'm allowed to speak as maybe an electronics engineer, a computer engineer, right? So that's number one thing. And secondly, even if you're not a technical person, you need to find a technical person that you can trust and work with in building this product. Because the world is evolving, and as the world evolves, it's actually very difficult for you not to have some form of, should I say, technical inclination if you're creating any digital product. Now, people can wake up, write prompts on an AI tool, and that AI tool will generate a product, right? So you realize that because some people have this mindset that, okay, I don't have to be technical. I'm a business person. I get a technical person to do the work. I don't need to pay attention to the actual work. That's not true. Now, there's a sort of thin line between, business and technical founders, because at this point, anybody can be technical. You can just write prompts, like I said, and AI tools will generate it. But it doesn't mean that the product will sell that much, but it just shows that you can learn to be technical or to understand the technical part of the digital product you're building. So I think I'll just end with this. At the foundation of building any digital product is understanding it from first principles, from ground up. I think maybe towards the end of the session, I will give a live example, an experience I had, and why I encourage founders or builders to go that approach. It is very difficult, but I think long term, you reap the benefits and you wish you actually took that harder path. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. What you said now just reminded me of a quote from Mark Zuckerberg when he said, "Ideas don't come fully formed. You start it and then you figure it out along the way." Thank you for that. So you mentioned something about having some technical skills. So I would like to know, beyond this technical part of it, what else do you need to sustain skill at that global level?
Okay, to sustain skill, that's a tricky question because at this point, even at my position, we're still figuring out ways to sustain skill, right? But yeah, I think it's also good. So first thing is finding the fastest ways or things that never worked. And you don't have to be emotional about it, right? And I also try to distill this into the Nigerian, Enugu or Nigerian context. Because the kinds of things you would see here or the way you would sustain products here isn't the same way you would sustain products in the United States or in Europe or in Asia, because we have our own, nuances and all that. So looking at the context here, you need to check what are the things that you have failed at, right? What are the resources maybe you don't have access to? Because for you to get to a particular level, most people think that you need a crazy amount of funding. You may need, to raise hundreds of millions of dollars for you to achieve skill. That's not correct. And also, most people will think that you need a lot of money to sustain it. That's actually not correct. There's a lot of money or capital to burn. To sustain skill, you need to make sure you manage your resources very well. You need to say more no's than yeses. And that also goes with, by resources, I mean time, your time as a founder, as an engineer, and also the money you spend. You need to be much more frugal at that stage. You may have $100 million in your bank account, but you need to be careful how you spend $1. Because at scale, one mistake can, move at, orders of magnitude exponentially, and it can wipe out your entire capital. And that's the problem. I don't know if you guys might know about this saying, the bigger you get, the harder you fall. And that's true. And that's the same thing with gravity. If I'm suspended at that height, and I'm suspended at maybe just this height here, if I fall from here, I'll probably not have any injuries. But from there, you're gone. And that's the same way you can liken skill, in your business and sustaining it to, the business going under. So it's easier for you to even hit ground zero at certain high points. So when you try to sustain skill, make sure you manage your resources properly. You say more no's than yeses. You try to focus on what has been working for you. That's probably why when you see some companies when they grow big, they don't try too many new things. And because at times, when we started off, I used to say, oh, these guys, why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? At this point, I'm beginning to understand why. Because trying out a new thing means putting a lot of resources into it, putting a lot of time. And if that thing doesn't work, it creates, a negative effect. And for smaller companies, you can try out things. But as you grow, you can't really try out too many things. That's why it's even easier for large companies to buy out smaller companies that have succeeded in those things. It's easier for them to spend the money, right? Maybe they just spend $20, $30 million. If it goes bust, that's fine. But if they were to start doing the research and everything thoroughly, they will probably spend hundreds of billions of dollars. So at that level, you need to manage your time, resources, and, pick your battles, so to speak. Yeah.
So it just boils down to resource management. Okay. That's amazing. In case people have something that you're trying and you don't have time to do, I have time. All right, so let's take it back. So now we're talking about building a skill. Let's take it back to like the foundation, to people that are still getting into this space. We have this culture of people always building in isolation. It's very common with African builders. So how can we create like a system to what's the mindset, what's the system that we need to create around the building culture so that people know that you can't do it alone. You have to leverage on ecosystem.
Okay, so I may share different approach, maybe not what a lot of people will think. Yes, people build in private. I also see people who build in public. I won't say there's a best approach, right? I'll be very honest. I've never really been someone who built anything like that in public from when I started. It's probably when the business had gotten to a certain point, then, you can put it out there and people can use it, but not necessarily say maybe this is. I see people document their building, the process. Maybe they say day 1, day 2, so the world can hold them accountable. That's probably fine, but I think there are certain types of things you'll be working on, and you may not need anybody's validation. And personally, one thing I always would want to encourage founders to do is because nowadays everything is online, and most people would rather have that media validation than actually building something that truly works. I see it every day, right? And it makes no sense. So going back to for founders in this region, if you have a very interesting project or something you're building, I would recommend that you build it. When it gets to a certain point where you can reach out to people to try it out, then they try it out. There are things I've built that died or that didn't work. A couple of people didn't know about it. Some people knew about it, but I just had to close the chapter on that and moved on, right? But the most important thing is making sure that whatever you're building, that within yourself, you're convinced that you're doing the right thing. You don't need to allow someone else to tell you, okay, this is the right thing or this is not the right thing. And like I said, I've seen it a lot on, social media, Twitter, and all these platforms. So I would recommend that if you're building something in private, go on. If you're building in public and you think that that's what works best for you, go on. But when you have too many ideas at very early stages, too many people telling you this, people who probably who have no idea what you're doing, it also affects people emotionally, people who don't have that strong mental model to withstand whatever people say. They will just break down or they will cave in a very short period of time. So in that case, it would be better to sort of isolate yourself, not in the word of, not in the sense of, not talking to people, but it's better to focus and build that thing, get it to a point where you can now maybe tell people about it, and then they also start to do it. And then I think isolation, there's this guy, I may not have the entire quote, I may just paraphrase. I don't know how many of you know about Charles Bukowski. He's a poet, a very brilliant person, and he says, isolation is a gift. And in all honesty, I think isolation is a gift. If you're able to do things on your own or with a few people, work on very hard problems, build complex systems, or solve, very, very difficult problems without having any external person encouraging you, telling you you're doing well, I think you build a certain type of mindset that allows you to do anything. It creates discipline. And that's the biggest problem a lot of people have. A lot of people have this idea. It's easy to inspire people here at this event. I said it last year, and I've said it at a couple of events. You can come and hear nice people, or people say so many nice things, and you're pumped or encouraged for 24 hours. The problem is, what do you do the next day? And the day after that, and the day after that, when things are not working, what do you do? So at that point, isolation helps to create character. And I think for me, if I'm to lean to anything, I'll say, look, build your stuff, create that mental model where you can withstand anything. Then if you come out and people are saying things, no problem. You just keep at it. Thank you.
Thank you for that. So I want to add what you just said. Ask rather. So you said there's no right way, and I think I agree to that to some point, but I also think that people do it to leverage on community because they don't have like foundation. People like Anthropic, they don't tell you we are working on, you just see it. So you just go on, they drop something and you won't see them saying day one, day two, and all that. And I feel like it's because they've gotten to a point where they have like solid foundation and they can afford to build in silence and just show the public. And they feel they can afford to go back and redo it again. So yeah, I think that makes sense. All right. So so in next question, how should African founders think about regulation and compliance when scaling across borders?
Okay. Well, African founders, how they should think about regulation, compliance. All right. So I think first is it depends on the industry you're playing in. When we look at finance, for example, finance is heavily regulated in Nigeria, in Africa, right? Just like crypto. Now we've seen the new tax bill, crypto was included, and people are chasing the money because, people, once you follow the money, you will have a good chance of getting some back. So the regulatory bodies are very interested in finance. But I think finance is good, but it's just a minuscule part of the contribution that great minds sitting here can actually make to science and technology, right? And there are certain areas of science and technology that have almost zero regulation. And in fact, it's the scientists or the researchers or the builders or the founders that will be able to speak to the regulators and drive the direction that that particular industry should follow. And if you leave me, that's what I will encourage everybody to do. I heard like the e-transact ladies speak about e-transact. These guys have been there for older than a lot of people sitting here, right? Finance is so old. And I think that even the new part of finance, which is crypto or Web3, is interesting, right? But there are other things or other industries that are not heavily regulated that people can play in. And I will encourage them to do that. So you shouldn't worry about regulation. I think it doesn't make sense. It stifles or thwarts your thinking ability when you start to think about regulation. I'll use my company as an example. One of them, YCrypt, when we started building things and breaking into routers, access points, trying to understand how the systems worked, breaking into their operating systems and all those things, and just hacking the systems to get a full picture because of the challenge we faced at some point with our mobile app. At that point, I didn't care about regulation. I was like, to hell with whoever is. In fact, it didn't even cross my mind. And then, when we had achieved a certain level of success, guess what? Nigeria Communications Commission called us for an event, and we were one of the winners there. And from there, we went to Saudi Arabia, and we were number one in the world. And kudos to the Nigerian government and to the Nigeria Communications Commission, because if they had come to us then and they said, oh, this thing you're doing, it's not legal, or who gave you the license to do this, it would have destroyed the company. But now, the company is thriving, right? So that's the thing. You don't think about regulation, and you also try as much as possible when you interact with the regulatory body or the people who are now supposed to regulate, you try to defend your product and show them why this approach should work and why the regulation should now be done according to, like your technology sort of. So you define it. So that's how I'll encourage African builders. And it's easier for us to do it here. If you go to a place like the United States, even setting up a bank, okay, I'll give you an example. In America, all the 50 states, if you're going to set up your bank, you need to get your license in all 50 states. It's ridiculous. Same thing with, because last year they were doing SEC in the US, they were doing a road show, teaching people about crypto, telling people to register their crypto companies. But guess what? You would have to still get your license in all 50 states of the United States. And that goes for so many things. These are advanced economies. You don't even want to go to Asia. As an African, it won't be very easy for you to get licenses to operate. But here, the foundation, things are still raw. The land is fallow. So you have the opportunity to break that ground and define how rules and regulations would work. So you bend it to your will. And for me, that's the best. That's the reason why this is the best place to build, right? As Nigerians, as Africans, it's actually the best place because you're the one that will make the laws over time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very nice perspective to think about it. Okay. So we'd like to know what common mistake. I think what you just mentioned now is just like one mistake people make, thinking about compliance too much. So what other common mistakes do people make when they are trying to scale beyond Africa globally?
Okay, mistakes people make when they are trying to scale.
Yeah, mistakes that limit scalability.
Okay, when they are scaling. Okay, yeah. Beyond Africa. Okay, honestly, one thing I would say about scaling is when you get your product to a certain point, you would realize that maybe you don't really have a money problem. The problem you may have for you to achieve scale is a distribution problem, right? You can create a very good product, but then if you cannot get it to, let's say, a couple of million people, then the product cannot really make you money or it can't have impact. So at that point, partnerships are very important. And that's why building products or building companies that you can sell or, use to offer services to larger companies is a very important thing. I'll give you an example. I won't be able to mention publicly, but okay, let me use MTN just acquired, I think IHS, the guys that have the masts or, the towers, the cell towers. If you look at that acquisition, it cost them about $6 billion in cash. What does it tell you? MTN is liquid. I don't know companies that will bring out $6 billion in cash in Nigeria to buy another company. So it shows that they are liquid. Now, you can ask yourself, what are the things that a company like MTN or Airtel or Glo, people who watch soccer here, I watch soccer, right? I'm a Manchester United fan, by the way. So, people who watch soccer here, I'm sure when you're seeing the ads, you see MTN saying they have 85 million customers, right? That's 85 million people. Imagine if your product is something that MTN can plug into and that product can get to, even if it's just 10% of those customers on a monthly basis. That's 8.5 million people. And what you're pretty much doing is sitting down and counting your money every day. That is a form of scale. A lot of people don't see that. So you can look at companies like MTN, Glo, Airtel, and ask yourself, what problems do these people have that you can solve? If you guys go to places like Lagos, often, you would see that when you go to some of these companies, you see more of the Chinese people there than our people, right? Why? Because these guys fly from China. Anytime I'm coming into Nigeria for anything, although I live here in Enugu, don't get me wrong, so I just travel for business. Anytime I'm coming into Nigeria, you're seeing, the Chinese, other Asians, people who may not even be able to speak English. And they are coming in, going to those companies, going to some oil companies, going to these guys to provide services to them. And when you look at some of the core services they provide, those things are companies actually that they have built, and then they take it, they tell them, I can offer you this solution. But, around here, most people, most founders don't have that idea that, look, you have companies that can allow you to scale just next door, but you're not leveraging them, right? Another thing is the government. So Nigeria has this, I think Nigerian Content Management Development Board, people that deal with, local content. It was just yesterday, I was having dinner with one of the, one of the speakers, and he was even telling me about the financial space, that it was those guys that allowed, banks have this thing they call the core banking software. Initially, all those services used to be provided by people from the US or Indians, right? But the content management guys now said no. If Nigerians can build it, use Nigerians. And guess what? Guys like MoneyPoint build this stuff. People, all the banks in Nigeria now, their core banking systems are pretty much built by Nigerians. That is a form of skill that people don't see. So it's something I encourage founders to do here. Look at companies around you. You can build solutions to target their hardest problems. And even if that problem is being solved by someone from US or China or anywhere, as long as your solution can solve that problem, you can call on, I think it's Executive Order 003 or whatever on local content, and you will trigger that law, and they will buy from you. And that way, you can just create a small device or a small machine solving something, and you sit down and you count a lot of money. And when you have that kind of partnership, you can just go and raise, even if you still want to raise more money, you can now talk to investors, and they see that agreement, they see the partnership, and they write you checks if you want to scale much more. So that's the idea of skill I would use here. In other countries, it might be different, but for here, I think that's what I'll do. Thank you.
Amazing. That's nice. All right, so last question, and this is going to be like for you. So we'd like to know your journey so far, building and scaling all these years. What lessons have you learned that you want to share to?
When you make some money, then ideas start coming. When you make some money, then ideas start coming. Maybe you need to hire this expert. This guy is an expert in financial security, financial technology. He's an expert in